All right, let's get right into it. We're about to unpack one of the most incredible legal battles in modern history. I'm talking about a moment when a nation's parliament and its Supreme Court went head-to-head over the very soul of its constitution. This is the story of the Kesavananda Bharati case. So, what's this all really about? Well, it boils down to one huge question. Imagine you have a rule book, right? The supreme law of the entire country. Can the government just keep changing it one little piece at a time until it's, well, not really the same rulebook anymore? That's the fundamental conflict here. The power to change versus the need to preserve a constitution's identity. Now, this epic showdown didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Oh no. It was the climax of a constitutional tug-of-war that had been going on for decades. So, let's take a quick look at the key moments that really set the stage. At first, the court was pretty clear. In a couple of early cases, it basically said, yep, Parliament can amend pretty much anything it wants. But then, boom, 1967 happens, and we get the Golaknath case. The court does a complete 180, deciding by a super slim majority that Parliament has zero power to pass any amendment that messes with fundamental rights. You know, those core freedoms guaranteed to every single citizen. That decision basically drew a line in the sand, and it put the judiciary and Parliament on a collision course. And as you can probably guess, Parliament did not take that Golaknath ruling well at all. The government felt its authority was being undermined, so it struck back with a series of really powerful constitutional amendments. And these were specifically designed to flip the court's decision on its head and take back what it believed was its rightful power. Parliament's response was sharp and calculated. The 24th Amendment was a direct shot back at Golaknath. It basically said that Parliament's power to amend is a special constituent power, meaning it's the power to create the Constitution, not just make everyday laws. Then the 25th went after the right to property, and even tried to stop the courts from looking at certain laws. And the 29th? Well, that basically put a giant do not touch sign on some specific land reforms, shielding them from any legal challenge. Put these three together, and a final, massive showdown was pretty much guaranteed. So, of course, the legality of these amendments was immediately challenged. The whole thing was brought to court by a religious leader whose land was being affected. The case was going to be so massive, so important, that the Supreme Court had to do something it had never done before: convene a special, unprecedentedly large judicial bench to finally settle this fight for power. And just to give you an idea of how serious this was, the Supreme Court put together the largest bench in its entire history: 13 judges. 13. This wasn't just another case on the docket. This was a moment that was literally going to define the future of India's democracy. And this was the case that would decide it all: His Holiness Kesavananda Bharati versus the state of Kerala. The decision reached here would send shockwaves through the legal world, creating a principle that is still studied by lawyers and scholars all across the globe. So, what happened? Well, the court did something absolutely brilliant. It didn't just pick a winner and a loser. Instead, in a true stroke of judicial genius, it created a middle path, introducing a completely new legal idea that would redefine the very limits of power. And get this, the final verdict came down to a single vote. It was a 7-6 majority, a razor-thin margin. This just shows you how incredibly difficult and important these questions were. It was a deeply divided court, and that one vote difference was about to change constitutional law forever. And here it is, the result of that vote: the Basic Structure Doctrine. Okay, think of the Constitution like a house. The doctrine says Parliament can renovate it. You can change the paint, knock down some walls between rooms, even add a new floor. You can amend any part. But what you cannot do is touch the foundation. You can't demolish the core pillars that are holding the whole house up. You cannot alter the basic structure so much that the house itself is no longer recognizable. So what exactly are these unshakable foundations? Well, the court gave some examples to illustrate the idea. Things like, the fact that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, the idea that you have a democratic government, the separation of powers between the branches of government, and the fundamental dignity of every individual. These, the court said, are the non-negotiables. So, what was the actual legal reasoning here? For all of you future lawyers, especially those studying for the Advocate on Record exam, this is what you really need to know. We call it the ratio decidendi. It's the core principle that the judgment actually establishes. Let's just walk through the court's findings. First, they overturned Golaknath, which meant Parliament got back the power to amend fundamental rights. So that's a big win for Parliament, right? But, and this is the absolute game changer, The court immediately said that this power is not unlimited. It cannot touch the basic structure. And here's the kicker. Look at that last point. The court struck down the part of the 25th Amendment that tried to get rid of judicial review, saying that the power of the courts to review laws is itself a part of the basic structure. If you had to boil this entire massive, complex judgment down to just one sentence, it would be this one right here from the majority opinion. It perfectly captures that delicate balance the court was aiming for. It recognizes Parliament's power, but draws a final, uncrossable line to protect the Constitution's fundamental identity. So here it is, the ultimate takeaway from all of this. The Kesavananda case created a powerful balance. Parliament has broad power to amend the Constitution, so it can evolve with the times. But, and it's a huge but, that power is not infinite. It is checked by the judiciary, which has the duty to protect that constitutional foundation. And a key part of that foundation is the power of judicial review itself. And that leaves us with a fascinating question, one that people are still debating today. Is this basic structure doctrine a necessary safeguard that protects democracy from a government that might overreach? Or was it a judicial invention, something the court essentially created out of thin air because it wasn't explicitly written in the Constitution? It's a deep question about the balance of power, and it's the legacy this landmark case leaves us to think about.
Thank you everyone for joining the class and please like, share, subscribe my channel. आप लोग सब्सक्राइब नहीं करोगे तो फिर आप लोग को वीडियो नहीं मिलेगा और आप लाइक करोगे तो मुझे मोटिवेशन मिलेगा. Thank you for joining once again. Tata, bye bye, take care.